I had spent my 20s pretty consciously running from my family trauma. I had just turned 30. I was on one of my multi-month solo bikepacking trips and was realizing that this chapter of my life where I was just living for my own sense of wonder and my own ability to escape had come to a close. I felt this growing sense of responsibility that I didn't fully know how to name. So I found myself biking alone up a mountain in Mexico. I had a moment unlike anything that has happened before or after, and the landscape dissolved into tendrils of light, and it spoke, and it said, "Someone has to feed the ghosts." And I then spent 9 years following that directive. I undertook this project because there was a broken story in my family, and I knew the only way to set this ill-set bone was to re-break it. My goal in doing it was to heal my relationship with my mother. To me, it felt like I had been stitching this enormous set of lungs, just taking on faith that it was going to work. And I remember a moment sitting at my table and writing a word and suddenly feeling the lungs draw breath. And that experience of, it's alive, it's gonna work. By the time I came to Hedgebrook in 2021, I had been working on my book for 6 years, and what I needed more than anything was to be in community with other women writers, and Hedgebrook gave that to me beyond my wildest dreams. What I was drawn to was the fact that I was telling this deeply matrilineal story. It really made me reflect on the ways that women are memory keepers, culture bearers, and how this vital task of continuity and transmission of not just knowledge but values is unacknowledged, both in terms of what it costs and in the way that it needs to be held by others. So I'm guessing I applied to Hedgebrook saying something along the lines of, I am carrying this thing that I know is at the limits of my capacity to endure, and I need help carrying it. You get a space that gets to be your sanctuary. You get the most Hobbit, bucolic Virginia Woolf, not just a room of one's own, but a wood stove of one's own, a napping window seat of one's own. And there's something really beautiful to knowing that there are 5 other people in their own cabins in this beautiful patch of wood. Just the way that I got to become part of this incredibly powerful mycelial network by becoming a resident here is just a gift. My favorite place on the land was actually not on the land, because after dinner, I would take a single beer and I would go down at sunset to just watch all of the birds settling in for a night along that marsh. I don't actually remember finishing the final page, but I always knew that it was going to have to end at the ocean, and that every section of the book ends in water, and that's where it would have to close. It did succeed beyond my wildest dreams. It has transformed my relationship with my mother. It has given us an ability to hold grace and compassion and to be able to hug each other and say, I love you. And it was worth it. I never have a moment of doubt about that. I made the book because I was a cowboy trying to find my own path in from the range, and the messages that I think have meant the most to me are from other people who are trying to find a way to come back to their own softness and don't know how. Feeding Ghosts was an answer to the question of what does one do with their privilege? Because my grandmother and my mother didn't have the resources and safety to be able to carry this story home. And I think winning the Pulitzer, it would be disingenuous to pretend that it hadn't suddenly given me a lot more power, and I needed to sit with that question of what do I do with this new power? And I think a lot of what we're seeing in this current moment in the United States is power untethered to community responsibility. And I'm very interested in basically using this Pulitzer as a way to strengthen community. My hope for the future of Hedgebrook is that the seeds that have been growing here for generations will just continue to bloom. There is an enormous amount of power in storytelling. I think these places of sanctuary will become increasingly more important in the world that we are moving into because they are sites of resistance. Hedgebrook has organically grown something pretty incredible over all these decades, just through who has been sitting in these cabins and in these chairs. And my hope is that that will continue to just grow larger.